Hello everyone, how are you? Today we're gonna animate this building. Remember, there's a modeling tutorial as well, but you can always model other kinds of building and use these techniques as well. I will walk you through keyframe by keyframe, but my process wasn't as clean and linear as it might seem in this tutorial. I tried several things and different timings, so what I suggest is you try to understand the thought process behind it and maybe go keyframe by keyframe once you finish this animation so you can really learn something you can use in another project and not simply just finish a tutorial. That being said, let's begin. Here we have the building we've modeled in the past video. Let's go to side view, and first we're gonna animate this base. Shift S, cursor to selected, and here in the view panel let's find the 3D cursor and move it down a bit so it sits at the bottom of our mesh. And now origin to 3D cursor. I'm gonna animate in camera view. Let's enlarge the timeline. Go to frame 17 and set a location keyframe. Let's open these channel groups. In frame 12, move up on the Z-axis and insert a location keyframe. Now in frame 24, set a scale keyframe. And in frame 20, scale down on the Z-axis to create a bounce effect and set a scale keyframe. In frame 8, duplicate the final scale keyframes. And in frame 1, scale to 0 and set a scale keyframe. Let's see. So first, the object appears from the top, then it goes down, it scales down a bit more, and it goes back to its final shape. I'm gonna show you keyframe by keyframe and you can see the values in the transform panel. Now for the building animation, we're gonna use shape keys. Add 2 shape keys and select the key 1 and set a keyframe for the value in frame 37 and now go to frame 24. In edit mode, select the top face and move it down on the Z-axis. Make sure it's down all the way. And back to object mode, let's disable X-ray mode. Set the value to 1 and set a keyframe. Now insert a scale keyframe and 1 frame before that one, a scale to 0 and insert a scale keyframe. Let's take a look. Looking good. I'm gonna take you through each keyframe real quick. To animate the border, first let's see where to put the last keyframe. In frame 30, set a scale keyframe. And when the building is already up a bit, like here in frame 27, let's scale. Wait, escape. The origin is up here. We need to set the origin to geometry. And now we can scale to 0 and set a scale keyframe. Let's see. Let's move the keyframes a couple of frames. And it's too fast, so move the last keyframe to frame 32. I'm gonna move both keyframes a couple of frames again. And 1 frame after the first scale keyframe, scale the border since we have the building covered in this mesh, and it doesn't make any sense to have it go from 0 to its final size, since it's not going to be visible anyway. Set a scale keyframe and let's see. I want the animation to start a bit sooner, so let's move all the keyframes. And one final look at this animation. To animate the roof, first set the origin to geometry, and in frame 45 insert a location keyframe. In frame 40, set a scale keyframe. In frame 37, scale to 0 and insert a scale keyframe. Let's see. And now in frame 41, move the roof up on the Z-axis and insert a location keyframe. Okay, what we're missing here is a bit of a bounce effect. to make the animation a bit more pleasing. So in Edit mode, select the bottom face, Shift S, Cursor to Selected, and Origin to 3D Cursor. Since we moved the origin, now we need to fix the last location keyframe. Remember to set a location keyframe. And now in frame 48, set a scale keyframe, and one frame before that one, scale down on the Z-axis and set a keyframe. And here we have a little bounce. Let's move the last scale keyframe one frame, and let's move the last two scale keyframes. And move the last scale keyframe one frame again. Let's see. And here we have each keyframe one by one. Now we can move on to animating the front wall openings. Hide everything but the Boolean object. In Edit mode, select this outer face, Shift S, Cursor to Selected, and Origin to 3D Cursor. We want the windows to scale from that outer face, that's why we changed the origin there. In frame 48, set a scale keyframe, and in frame 40, scale on the Y-axis until the meshes are no longer touching the building, and set a scale keyframe. Hide the Boolean object in Viewport and in Renders, and now we can create a cascade effect. First, we need to apply the array modifiers. In Edit mode, A to select all, F3 to get the search panel, and separate by loose parts. And now these are all individual objects. Select them all and send them to a new folder to keep everything a bit more organized. And now we need to select this building and change the first Boolean modifier to collection and choose this new collection. Choose a frame where the building is a bit visible, like frame 31, and move these keyframes there. Move 4 frames forward and take these object's keyframes there. Again, move 4 frames and take these keyframes there. And one last time. Hide the Boolean's collections. Let's take a look. Let's see each keyframe one by one. Now we can animate the side window openings. Hide everything but the Boolean objects, and again we need to set the origin to this outer face. Shift S, Cursor to Selected, and Origin to 3D Cursor. In frame 60, let's set a scale keyframe, and in frame 50, scale on the X-axis, and remember to scale the objects until they no longer touch the building. And set a scale keyframe. Let's see how many frames this animation lasts to match it. Move the keyframes to frame 43. And let's take the last keyframe to frame 51. And now let's count 4 frames, so this animation starts 4 frames after this one. Let's see. To create a cascade effect, delete this array modifier since it's doing nothing, and apply this one. In Edit mode, select all and separate by loose parts. Take both objects to a new collection, and change the second Boolean modifier from the building to that collection. The first frame is in frame 47, so move 4 frames and move the bottom object's keyframes to frame 51. Hide this collection and let's see. Let's see each keyframe one by one. To animate the chimneys, we're gonna use shape keys. Add 2 shape keys and in Edit mode, move this top face down. back to object mode, add another shape key, and in edit mode, move it down again. These are link duplicates, so if I animate one of them, the other one gets animated as well. Enable X-ray mode, so we can select all these top faces and move them down on the Z axis. In frame 50, set the key number 2 to 1 and insert a keyframe. In frame 55, set the value to 0 and set a keyframe, and in the same frame, select the key number 1, take the value to 1 and insert a keyframe. In frame 50, take the value to 0 and insert a keyframe. In frame 60, set the value to 0 and insert a keyframe. Let's see. We need to move the chimneys down a bit on the Z-axis, and since these are linked duplicates, let's make them a single user. Now we can move the keyframes of the second chimney so they don't start in unison. The ending is a bit slow, so I'm gonna move the last keyframes. Let's repeat with the other chimney. And now in the first keyframe, set a scale keyframe, and one frame before, scale to 0 and insert a scale keyframe. And do the same for the other chimney. Let's see. Let's see each keyframe one by one. Now let's animate the side window frames. Go to frame 63 and set a location keyframe. In frame 41, move on the X-axis until the frames are not visible and insert a location keyframe. In frame 55, duplicate the final keyframes so we can use this location as a reference, and now move on the X-axis outwards a bit and insert a location keyframe. Let's see. In the first keyframe, set a scale keyframe, and one frame before, scale to 0 and insert a scale keyframe. Let's see where the booleans appear so we can make the frames appear after that. Select all the keyframes and move them to frame 45. Apply the array modifier, and in edit mode, go to a frame where the windows are visible and enable X-ray mode. Select one frame and separate by selection. Here, separating by loose parts won't work as we want, since we have several meshes. And now in frame 60, move the bottom frames keyframes. I want both frames to appear a bit later, so select both of them, A to select all the keyframes and move everything to frame 58. And here we have it. Everything seems kinda slow because the animation is lagging a bit. You can always create a pre-visualization or previs. There are many tutorials on how to do it. Let's see each keyframe one by one. Now let's animate the blinds. First, set the origin to this top edge. Shift S, cursor to selected, and origin to 3D cursor. Let's disable X-ray mode, and I want a few more frames. In frame 100, insert a scale keyframe, and in frame 90, a scale on the Z-axis. Make sure the blind disappears a bit on the window frame, and insert a scale keyframe. Add two shape keys, and in edit mode, select all the faces, and remember we separated all these faces in the modeling video. Set the origin to individual origins. Now rotate them on the Y-axis to make them look like they are open. In the first keyframe, set a scale keyframe, and one frame before, scale to 0 and insert a scale keyframe. To create a bit of a bounce effect, duplicate the last keyframes in frame 96 to have a reference, and scale up on the Z-axis and set a scale keyframe. I want to touch up the last keyframe. Let's scale it down a bit on the Z-axis and set a scale keyframe. And now in frame 102, set a keyframe for our shape key, and in frame 110, set the value to 1 and insert a keyframe. Let's move the blinds down a bit. Then I wanted to apply this array modifier, but I couldn't because I had used shape keys, so I duplicated the mesh and removed the array modifier from both meshes, and I simply moved one of the blinds down. Here you could move one of the blind's keyframes to create a cascade effect, like we did for the frame windows. I chose not to. Let's see each keyframe one by one. And like I said, both blinds are animated in unison. Okay, now we're gonna animate this wall opening. In edit mode, set the cursor to this outer face, Shift S, cursor to selected, and origin to 3D cursor. In frame 114, insert a scale keyframe. And in frame 103, a scale on the y-axis and set a scale keyframe. I moved the keyframes several times, but I ended up choosing its final location when I had both the stairs and the door animated, and this is my final placement for the keyframes. Let's hide it, and here we have it. Let's go through each keyframe. Now we can animate the door. In frame 136, add a rotation keyframe. And since I want to move the door from one corner, in edit mode, select this side face, cursor to selected, and origin to 3D cursor. In frame 123, rotate on the Z-axis until the door disappears in the building. And insert a rotation keyframe. Let's see. Okay, now duplicate this last keyframe and rotate again on the Z-axis but outwards and insert a rotation keyframe. We're gonna create a door slamming animation. Let's see how it's going. And in the first keyframe, insert a scale keyframe, and one frame before, scale to 0 and set a scale keyframe. I would like one more rotation keyframe, so in frame 139, let's rotate it on the Z-axis again and set a rotation keyframe. Let's duplicate this keyframe where the door is in the final position. Looking good, but let's do it one more time. In the final keyframe, rotate outwards just a tiny bit so the motion decreases, set a rotation keyframe, and in frame 144, duplicate this keyframe. Move it one frame, and I'm gonna move the door on the y-axis a bit. Now let's see where the door animation should start. And now select all the keyframes and move. I chose the final placement of the keyframes once I had all the objects animated, and here it is. Let's see each keyframe one by one. Okay, now let's move on to the next one, which is the staircase animation. First, in order for this animation to work, we need to add a few cuts in the base of this staircase to match these side edges. In edit mode, press K to enable the knife tool. Go from one side to the other. Let's do one more. Add two shape keys, select this top face and move it down on the Z-axis until it matches the height of the second step. Back to object mode, add another shape key and select these two back faces and move them on the y-axis. Add another shape key and select this step and move it down on the Z-axis. and again add another shape key. And now we need to enable X-ray mode and select these two steps and move them on the y-axis until the first step is no longer visible. In frame 200, create a keyframe for the first shape key, and in frame 190, take the value to 1 and set a keyframe. In frame 180, select the second shape key and set a keyframe. In frame 170, set the value to 1 and set a keyframe. In frame 160, set a keyframe for the shape key number 3, and in frame 150, set the value to 1 and set a keyframe. And to fix this, with shape key number 3 selected, select this top face and move it down on the Z-axis. And now we fix it. In frame 140, set a keyframe for the shape key number 4, and in frame 130, set the value to 1 and insert a keyframe. In edit mode, take the cursor to this bottom face, Shift S, cursor to selected, and origin to 3D cursor. In frame 130, set a scale keyframe. And in frame 120, scale on the Z-axis until the step is no longer visible and set a scale keyframe. Let's see. Here we have two keyframes that look the same. So select all these keyframes and move them to frame 140. And here we have the same problem, so let's do the same. And we have the same problem again, so let's repeat the process. And now move all the keyframes to frame 31. And one frame before, scale to 0 and set a scale keyframe. The animation seems a bit too slow for my taste, so place the playhead right here and scale a bit. And after I animated all the objects, I decided to move the keyframes one last time. Let's go through every keyframe one last time. And we still have some objects to animate, but that, my friends, is a subject for another video. In the next one, we'll animate the remaining objects and we'll ease some of the animations using very simple techniques so you can enrich the movement of some objects by tweaking the animation curves and choosing from a variant of easing types and interpolation modes. And we still have a material and a lighting video coming so you can finish this project. So subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. As always, thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Bye!